Welcome to the BFI London Film Festival. My name is Justin Johnson, and I am thrilled to welcome you to this screening of Pixar's amazing new film, Soul. I'm delighted to welcome co-director Kemp Powers, producer Dana Murray, and director Pete Docter to join me for a spoiler-free extended introduction to today's screening.
That's good.
So, Pete, I'm going to start off with you. I mean, you don't make things easy for yourself in terms of your project choices. We last had you with us at the BFI for Inside Out. And I just wonder if you could just share with us a little bit about the kind of creative journey that you went on after that film and then kind of coming up with the idea for Soul.
Yeah, this film is really about, it kind of explores like, how is it that we're born with certain personality quirks? I have two sisters, totally different. We all grew from the same genetic stock and in the same household, but totally different people. My kids are the same way. How is that possible? So we started to think about, well, it's because we're each born with a soul. But where did those souls come from, and what was the training involved there? And that's what led to this concept. So it's been a really fun journey and very difficult because, of course, what do souls look like? I mean, they're invisible, they're air, ethereal, vaporous, and we had to figure all this stuff out. I kind of feel like Inside Out prepared me for this one, which was tough.
And Dana, moving on to you, I mean, you've worked at Pixar for many years on different projects and in different roles. And then with the short film Lou, you took on the producer role. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little about that transition from producing a short film to producing a feature film, and especially bearing in mind, I think it was due to be made over a 5-year period, and you ended up going into a 4-year period with it.
Yeah, I was very lucky to work with Pete and Jonas on Inside Out. And like Pete just said, it was kind of boot camp in a way to training. But looking back, that schedule seems so luxurious now, that 5-year schedule. Yeah, and then, the short films at Pixar really are great training as well, because you're basically producing one mini sequence, but you get to deal with the parts of the film that I hadn't before, like, casting and music and more the external parts of the film that when you're working at Pixar, I hadn't done. So, yeah, but being put on Soul, it wasn't going to be a 4-year project when I signed on, but in a way, I'm glad it was. Yeah, I got a year back in my life now.
Yeah. Just in time.
Yeah.
And Kemp, I know you were initially brought on to work on the project in a writing capacity. You had produced that great stage play, One Night in Miami, which has just been made into a film, which I know you've written the screenplay for and is now hitting the festival circuit. But can you just tell us, first of all, about how the project was or where it was at when you joined it, and then that move into being a co-director as well?
Sure. When I came on board, it was about, I think, 2 years into the development of the project. So it really wasn't fully formed just yet. A lot of the characters were still vague. We still hadn't worked out a lot of the plot points. And I mean, I initially came on just trying to bring my own personal expertise to flesh out the main character of Joe Gardner. Me and Joe have a lot in common. He's a middle-aged Black man from New York. Oh, guess what? I'm a middle-aged Black man from New York. And I was like, what are the chances that Pixar would actually be doing a film where the protagonist's life is very much like mine? So, I kind of came in feeling very, very confident. But, as you quickly learn when you work on these Pixar projects, like I describe myself first and foremost as a storyteller. And if you're someone who cares about story, Pixar is kind of intimidating. It's kind of like the house of master storytelling. So this was very much like a boot camp from a writing perspective. But Pete, what was so wonderful was that Pete and Dana, from the very first stages, really invited me into all elements of the process. From the casting to the design of the characters, obviously, because you've never had so many Black American characters in one Pixar film, to things like edit and dailies. So I think about a year into it, I realized it had been kind of like a Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi situation, where I've been like painting a fence and sanding the floor, and Pete was like, "You are now my co-director." So, it was a really, it kind of caught me off guard because this is my first animated film. So I wasn't aware of all that went into, I didn't realize that I was kind of getting the hands-on training that I was getting until, Pete and Dana pulled me aside and asked me if I'd be co-director on the film.
And in terms of that kind of looking for that kind of authentic voice, is it right? This is kind of, any of you obviously could jump in here, but is it right that you reached out to some of your employees as well at Pixar and you kind of brought in some of their experiences as well?
Yeah, we formed an internal culture trust. And those are the Black Pixar employees that we really reached out to and brought them into the process to watch the film, give feedback, character design, set design. And then we also got external consultants on the film. And so we had many voices contributing, which was really key to the process.
Yeah, amazing folks. We got to work with Herbie Hancock, and we visited Quincy Jones, and of course, our the guy who did the music on the film, the jazz part, is John Batiste, who's fantastic, wonderful musician, great historian as well, and just really a joy to be around. I think he really brought a lot to the storytelling as well, without even really trying, I think.
Yeah, one of the I was going to say, one of the things I loved about having so many consultants with so many different voices, one was that it really took the burden off of me of having to represent every Black person in the world's opinion. And two, I think it was illuminating for everyone involved in the process, is that if you put all 20 of our 20 consultants in one room, I think all 20 of them had completely different opinions about everything. So you learn that there was no one quote unquote authentic Black voice. And I think that was, I'm hoping it was a learning experience. It seemed like it was a learning experience on both sides.
And I guess, it's fair enough to say it has been a bit of a learning curve for all of you, in the sense that obviously, Dana, we've talked about, sort of developing your experience, moving from sort of shorts to features, and then Kemp in terms of moving into a sort of more of a director role. And then for you, Pete, obviously halfway through the project, you then took over the kind of creative leadership for the studio, which obviously must have taken up a lot of your time at the same time as directing this. How did you manage to kind of balance that?
Well, I think I'm still learning, but we had an incredibly strong crew in every department, from Kemp and Dana to really strong leads. And so just tried to lean on them as much as I could to fill in. And, yeah, it's been interesting because, there's so much going on at Pixar, more now than ever. And I think due to the pandemic, Disney Plus has asked us to do more streaming work as well. So there's just a ton going on. It's very exciting, and a lot of new voices at the studio as well.
And you touched on earlier about the fact that the soul kind of characters have this ethereal quality, this kind of non-physical nature. And this was just one of a number of different kind of technological challenges that you presented to your guys this time. I touched on the earlier saying about how you don't make things easy for yourself, but just in terms of the design of the characters, rather than just being, resting back in your laurels, knowing you've got lots of assets available to you, you had to create this whole new world, along with, a very accurate depiction of New York City and that kind of experimental jazz effects we're going to see in the film. I wonder if you just talk about some of those technological challenges.
Yeah, well, that's the fun of it, isn't it? Right, the stuff that you don't know how to do, that's what you want, and this film had plenty of that. Like I mentioned, we did talk to rabbis and priests, and we had a spiritual guy. What was the guy who came in?
Shaman.
Shaman.
Yeah.
Talking about like trying to get in tune with what do people believe the soul looks like, and of course it was vaporous and air, non-physical, and all these things. And so the design challenge was, how do you represent that somehow? We came up with this kind of idea of fog that is volumetric. You can turn it, spin it, and kind of see through it, which is very different than the hard, rigid surfaces that we've traditionally done on, say, Toy Story. So I think the film looks very unique and different. We tried to represent what we call the counselors. So where these souls are from is this place that's beyond time and space, and it's basically the universe training them in. So we needed to represent the universe in some sort of physical way, again, kind of dumbing itself down so that we can understand it. And so we came up with these counselors that are these strange kind of energy lines twisted into shapes. You'll have to see it. It's difficult to explain.
I think it's funny that among the characters that we've created, the counselors, one of whom is voiced by Richard Ayoade, on screen seem like they might be among the simplest, because they're basically 2D characters existing in a 3-dimensional space, but we created them as wire form. I think that was probably the greatest technological challenge for the animators. It was the thing in the film that we've never done before. And I remember being in an early meeting when they were like, we have no idea how we're going to do this. And Pete was like, well, I'm sure you'll figure it out. And I thought, aren't we in production? Shouldn't we know how to actually create this thing that we're writing? So
that's what happens every time. That's the fun of it, is like lobbing these bombs into the room, and people rise to the occasion and figure stuff out. And that's what leads to such different looks for us.
And in terms of the voice cast, you just touched on Richard Ayoade, and obviously there's Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey and Angela Bassett and our own Graham Norton as well. How did you work with the voice cast? Did they kind of come back over a period of time? Did they do it all from San Francisco? Are they are they going to studios in London or LA or different places? How does that work?
All of the things you mentioned. So they come to Pixar sometimes. We met in New York, like Graham Norton came over and we met in New York. So that was great. It's really great for that first recording session to at least get face to face so you can build trust and a rapport. But then, people's schedules are so busy. We had to do some remote. We have a very international cast. So, a lot of it ended up being remote. And then, we ended up in a pandemic finishing the film. So that all was remote. But yeah, I think we probably recorded most people like more than 5 times at least. Yeah.
And did any of them actually kind of spark off each other in terms of were they there physically at the same time, or were they all done individually?
We did have Tina and Jamie a couple times, and that was fun because you could see their brains going and working, and that's always creates a great sense of energy. We never met Rachel House. She was in New Zealand, and so it was just such a long flight for her to come to us, or vice versa. So we've never met her.
We still want
she's
to.
in the movie. Yes.
And obviously we are at the moment in the middle of the epidemic that you were touching on, and I wonder how finished the film was at the point when the epidemic started. And I noticed obviously in the credits, the audience is going to see it. It says how it's created and produced by Pixar in Emerville, and then you say, and at homes at least 6 foot away from each other in the Bay Area.
Yeah, we were within 7 weeks of finishing. Is that right, Dana?
It was 7 weeks. Yeah, I mean plus the post production, but.
So we had remote, we finished animation remotely. We did a lot of effects reviews, lighting finished up remotely. But we have this amazing technical group that, I don't know that they were really planning on this, but they were prepared for it. We all had computers within minutes, days anyway, at home. And it's been remarkable how seamless, and again, it's tribute to the systems guys as well as the flexibility of our amazing crew. So pretty cool.
Kemp, I wonder if I just ask you, obviously from the writing perspective, I guess you're used to working on your own, and the other work you've done, I guess, has been on your own. To then suddenly working as part of a big team as you have with Pixar, how did you find that?
Well, it's actually kind of like a hybrid between what I've experienced in writing for film, but also writing for television. Because writing for television is definitely more of a communal experience. You have a writer's room, you have a showrunner, and I think the Pixar process, it's a team sport at the end of the day. The reality is the story artists contribute to the writing of the film. The film is quote unquote being written, even when it's not being written by me with a keyboard. It's also being written as we go through story. It's being written in edit. It's definitely being acted in animation as much as it is by being recorded. So it takes a little bit of getting used to. But I think the biggest change, I think, is the brain trust. I think the one thing that Pixar does that I had never seen before, I'd never been subjected to before, was the process of going into 6 or 7 or 8 brain trust meetings where, for 3 hours, you have an audience, and I'll admit, oh, look, everyone here has Academy Awards. And they pretty much cut to the chase after every screening of your reels. So
just to clarify, the Brains Trust is a sort of leadership team made up of the Pixar directors who watch and comment on each other's work. Is that right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, that's it exactly. So Pete, Andrew Stanton, you have your Brad Bird, you have all the creative, Domi Shi, Dan Scanlon, Lee Unkrich, all the producers, and you're often accustomed to, in a writing environment, someone starting off saying kind of like, yeah, good job. Here's the things you did good. brain trust, we just cut right to what doesn't work. So
And that must be heartbreaking
so
sometimes when you've worked on something and it's a real kind of baby, if you like, but it's not working for the narrative and you have to cut it. That's really difficult, isn't it?
You know, I think that the reason it works so well for me is I spent 17 years as a journalist before I got into creative writing. And I think that kind of thick skin perfectly prepares you for being in the brain trust. So it was actually kind of interesting. I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. People are just being honest. And I'm not accustomed to this level of honesty in creative endeavors. So, but that was the big difference. But I have to say, it's something that if I had a choice, I wish we could implement it into so many other films and TV shows that we create. But I honestly don't. I think people are probably too sensitive to deal with it, to just get like unfiltered honesty from their peers. But I loved it. I mean, I wish I could take everything that I'm working on and kind of run it through the brain trust on the side. Like Pete's gonna probably get everything I write. I'm gonna probably be like, hey Pete, take a quick look when you have a chance and just, you know, let me know what you think of it, because it really helps the work.
Yeah, but Kemp's a masochist too, because it hurts. It hurts. It does. You do have to have kind of thick skin and recognize and remind yourself it's about the work. They're talking about the work, not me. I don't take it personally. So it does take a little bit of recovery time.
And one of the other kind of ingenious kind of things you've adopted is you've got this amazing music score that John Batista's done for New York City. And then you've got this other music score from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross for the Soul World. And I wonder if you just a little bit about your thinking behind that, because it really works.
Yeah, we were excited to work with both of them. Trent and Atticus provided such a different tonal quality to, you know, we've traditionally worked with Randy Newman and Michael Giacchino and folks, orchestral scores, very traditional. And this is the furthest from that. There's no, well, there are a few actual instruments, but they just have this amazing museum really of electronic equipment and really smart thinkers. I mean, I think that's what attracted us to them mainly was their approach, their creative approach. It's very unique and different, but always emotionally correct for what we were trying to communicate in the film. It was a little bit of a different process too. Usually we're used to post scoring. So we basically lock everything, it's frame locked, and then we give it to Michael or whoever to write the score. In this case, Trent and Atticus were writing the score as we were creating the sequences. So the music was malleable, the sequence was malleable. It was much more of an organic kind of process, which was just fun to shake things up.
I remember when Pete first mentioned the idea that he was even considering Trent and Atticus, and I remember like I squealed. He was like, I'm thinking about Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross for the score. What do you think of that? And I think I went, like I was so excited that they were willing to go in this very, very different direction. And I think it works so well. Like, I mean, you saw the film. I mean, I think it works so, it makes the film it makes it just seem different. It feels so different.
So the audience are now going to watch the film in a few moments. Should they be looking out for some of the kind of Pixar Easter eggs that you kind of often sort of throw in? I'm thinking about like A113 and the Pizza Planet track, and of course the voice of John Ratzenberger.
Yep, it's all there with slight asterisks because some of them are done in a little bit different. I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you have to look harder this time for some Easter eggs.
Okay, well that's good. That's a challenge to the audience now. So
you might have to come back.
Yeah, well, I have to come back and see it 2, 3, 4, or 5 times just to be able to see everything. It's a real thrill that we've got a chance to show the film as part of the London Film Festival this year. A big thank you to Pete, Kemp, and Dana for being here with us today, and we all hope that you enjoy the film.
Thank you, Justin.
Justin.
We hope everybody loves it.